So good afternoon, and welcome to our webinar on investing in a coronavirus world. Before we get started, I'd like to just first and most importantly wish everyone on the call the best of health and peace during this time. One of our most important core values here at Concentus is family. So if you're watching this, you're part of our community of people that we care a lot about, and I hope that you and your family stay healthy and remain as calm and peaceful and free of anxiety as you can during these challenging days. So let's talk about investing. And I'd like to start by trying to use the history of the capital markets as a good guide to help us to understand how we can expect our investments to behave during this time. So if we go back just about 100 years to the end of World War I, we'll find that the average annual return from the stock market, what I call equities, has been just about 10% per year. Over that same period of time, bonds, on the other hand, have produced an average annual return of more like 6% per year. And finally, the rate of inflation has been just about 3% per year. So one of the things we look at that we believe is really important is a thing we call real return, which is defined as the amount of return we have left after inflation impacts our investments. So if we can expect equities to produce a gross total return of 10%, we're actually only achieving a 7% in real return after inflation affects our investments. Likewise, a gross return of 6% produced by bonds is really more like just about 3% left for us after inflation. So our first point is that equities have historically produced a return that's just about 2.5 times the return that bonds have. I'm going to editorialize on that for just a minute, and I'm going to come back to this point a little bit later, but interestingly, this week, the 30-year Treasury bond hit an all-time low yield of 1%, which means this bond will pay you a return of 1% per year for 30 years. So I would argue that it's virtually a mathematical impossibility that anyone on this call will achieve anything even approaching a 6% long-term return from bonds in their remaining lifetime. But let's set that aside for a moment. So point number 2 is that an essential feature of equities, despite that great return advantage that they have, is that they're also very volatile, as we're seeing today. In fact, if we define a bear market in stocks as a 20% decline in stock prices, there have actually been 15 different times since 1946 when the S&P 500 has dropped by 20% or more, ranging anywhere from a decline of 20% to a decline of 57% back in the financial crisis of 2008. This current environment is the 16th bear market since World War II, and right now the S&P 500 is down just about 25% from its all-time high a few weeks ago. So while this particular episode seems scarier than anything we've experienced before, in fact, it kind of stands as just about an average. The other important point to remember, and probably the most important point, is that every single one of these 15 prior instances eventually bottomed out, started to recover, and then moved on to new highs. The evidence for this is very simple, and that is that back in 1946, the S&P 500 was 14. This afternoon, it's about 2,600. So the story of market history is we take 3 steps forward, we take 1 step back. There's also, in our view, some very important key information about those 16 market declines. On average, they've lasted for 40 months. So if you had the patience to wait it out, the average period of time it took you to travel from the market high to the depths of the market panic and all the way back to even again has been 40 months.